Hello and welcome to the Witness History podcast from the BBC World Service. I'm Josephine McDermott, and today we're going back to the start of Back to the Future, which was released 40 years ago. Bob Gale co-wrote the screenplay with Robert Zemeckis, and he's brought the musical to the stage.
How far are you going?
About 30 years.
Back to the Future is considered a perfect screenplay by a lot of writers. Its structure, its pacing. So I was wondering, if you were making a film about the making of Back to the Future, what would your opening scene be? And we love the details on Witness History.
The opening has to start with the epiphany moment where I got the idea. Interesting stories are not only about how do we make the movie, but how is it the movie almost didn't get made? So in the summer of 1980, I was back in St. Louis, which is where I grew up, visiting my parents. I was doing a promotional tour for the movie Used Cars, which had just opened there in August. Our basement had gotten flooded out, and my father salvaged a bunch of stuff, and he threw it in a box, and he said, "Son, go through this and see if there's anything that's worth keeping." So I went through it, and among the things that were in there was his high school yearbook from 1940. Now, I went to the same high school that my dad had gone to. I'd never seen his high school yearbook, so I pulled this thing out, and I said, "Oh, this would be cool. What did my high school look like back in 1940? And I'm thumbing through it, and I discovered that my father was the president of his graduating class, something I had no idea about. And I'm looking at this picture of my dad, and he's very, kind of proper and serious and all that. And I'm thinking about the president of my graduating class, who was a guy I would have nothing to do with, right? He was one of these school spirit, rah-rah guys. So I thought, if I'd gone to high school with my dad, would I have been friends with him? And that was the bolt of lightning striking me, saying, that is a movie. The movie Used Cars was not a hit at Columbia Pictures. We got to know pretty well the president of the studio, Frank Price, and Frank loved the movie that we made. And he said, when you guys have your next idea, I want to hear it first. And Frank got it immediately. Zemeckis wanted to keep telling him more, and I kept going, stop. He's going to give us a deal. He's going to give us a deal. And yeah, he gave us a deal. The first draft carried a date of February 1981, we turned it into the studio. The second draft we handed in April 1981, about 6 weeks later. And then they just said, well, we're not going to make this. It's very nice, it's very sweet, and we think the audience is looking for things that are a little bit raunchier. And we kept hearing that time travel movies don't make any money. Time travel movies don't make any money, which is a true statement in 1981, or we would hear, it's really sweet, it's really nice, maybe you guys ought to take this to Disney. We were at our wits' end, at our rope's end, and we said, well, what if everybody's right? Let's not leave a stone unturned. Let's go take it to Disney, and we did that, and we met with an executive by the name of Tom Wilhite, and I remember we walked into his office, and Tom looked at us, and he was appalled. He just said, are you guys out of your mind? Do you guys really think that Disney would make a movie about incest? You've got the kid and his mother in the car. We're Disney. We don't do that. So that was the end of Disney.
So you didn't just think, let's just write this off as a bad job?
No, we don't write things off. That just is not, that's not in our DNA. If it's a good idea, you put it in a drawer, and it's the story of Hollywood. How many stories have you heard about somebody, they couldn't get the movie made, they put it in the drawer, a couple of years later, they pull it out of the drawer, and next thing you know, they're in production. The times have changed, something has changed. And that is what happened with us, because what changed was Bob Zemeckis went off and he directed a very successful movie called Romancing the Stone. And Romancing the Stone was such a big hit that everybody and his uncle wanted to be in business with Bob Zemeckis and make whatever movie Bob wanted to make. And of course, the movie that Bob wanted to make was Back to the Future. Now, throughout this process, there was one guy who totally believed in it, and his name was Steven Spielberg.
I think the interest is just that we can't go to the future, we can't go to the past, except through the movies.
And it was very fortuitous because now Steven had made E.T. in 1982. He set up Amblin Entertainment at Universal, and we were the first movie to be produced out of Steven's new deal with Universal under the Amblin banner. So Steven got it set up with Universal, and that's how we got it going.
Isn't the real star of the film the car?
Well, yeah, but you don't have to tell me that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, the car is incredible.
I believe that in the first draft, the time machine wasn't the DeLorean and the pet wasn't Einstein the dog as we know him. Can you fill us in on what those changes were?
Absolutely, and I'm very impressed, Josephine, that you did your homework on this one.
Thank you, Mr. Gale.
I really appreciate that. Yes, in the first two drafts, the time machine was built out of an old refrigerator. It was a time chamber, and Doc had it in his lab, and there was no flux capacitor, but he needed a tremendous amount of electrical energy, of power, or some sort of power, to power this thing. And he had this device that was called a power converter, but he couldn't get it to work. And he had been working on this, and this early draft was, it started in 1982, and Marty goes back to 1952, because that's when we thought, if all goes the way we'd like it to go, we'll be making this movie next year. So the mystery in 1982 was how are we going to get the power converter to work? Well, Doc didn't have a dog. He had a chimpanzee named Shemp, after Shemp in the Three Stooges. Shemp is messing around in the lab, which is actually inside of an old movie theater, an abandoned movie theater in 1982, and accidentally knocks over a bottle of Coca-Cola into the equipment, and that is the secret ingredient that makes the power converter work. Because we said, okay, the formula for Coca-Cola is one of the most closely guarded secrets in the world. Wouldn't that be funny that turned out to be the scientific formula to make Doc's time machine work? And the climax of the movie was that he was going to have to transport Marty and the time machine out to a nuclear test site in 1952, and they were going to literally harness the nuclear energy from a nuclear bomb blast, nuclear test, into the refrigerator and send Marty back to 1982.
Who came up with the flaming tracks idea?
That was kind of initiated by ILM. When we went to ILM and we said, okay, we need to figure out what time travel is going to look like. Industrial Light and Magic, George Lucas's special effects company, which at that time was the best visual effects, optical effects company in the world. And due to Steven's great relationship with George Lucas, it was a foregone conclusion that they were going to be involved in creating our special effects. So we had meetings with those guys, and they came back with a whole bunch of different concept art pieces showing it could look like this, it could look like this, it could look like this. And I mean, meanwhile, we're figuring out what the DeLorean is going to look like. And the artist that sort of broke the back of what it was going to look like was a guy named Ron Cobb, who was a legend. He's not with us anymore. And we could only afford to hire him for 2 weeks. But, man, he killed it in those 2 weeks. And he put those coils on the DeLorean, and we thought, oh, those coils are really cool. We got to have those. And ILM looked at those coils and said, well, there's coils that got to glow. So these were all things that kind of developed. And in one of these concept pieces, there was a shot where there were fire trails, and we said, okay, that's cool. Let's have a trail of fire, and then what would be equally cool is that when it comes back, if it's iced up, so you have the yin and the yang of it all.
And the screenings were so successful, weren't they? Can you remember the first screening? And where did you sit? Where do you like to sit in the auditorium? Are you watching people's faces?
I personally like to kind of just sit somewhere in the middle so that there's people in front of me, but especially people behind me. Because especially if it's a comedy, you want to hear if they're laughing. And if you're sitting in the back of the theater, you'll hear some laughing. But if you're sitting closer to the front, you'll hear more of it because, people are facing forward and they're laughing. So that's where I like to be. They knew that it was a movie with Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd. There were no trailers yet. And this was in May 1985, and it was only about 3 weeks after we had finished principal photography. And when Einstein goes forward in time and the DeLorean disappears, there was this very kind of uneasy hush in the theater because people were worried that something bad had happened to that dog. And then they were very relieved when it came back. Then they find out it's a time machine. But the point where they really understood the movie they were seeing was when Marty goes into the cafe in 1955, "Hey, McFly," and he turns around and then you see his father is in there as a kid and it's Biff as a kid. And there was this sense in the theater, you could just feel it. Oh, that is so great. Oh, that's so cool. And from that point on, the audience was totally with it for that first screening. And even at the end of the movie, when the car flies, that shot wasn't even finished. It was in black and white. It didn't matter. They were on their feet. They were crazy.
And what do you remember about the premiere? I don't know if I've got this right, but obviously the release date in the States was in the summer, and yet the London premiere is December of that year with like Christmas trees in the archive pictures. Is that how it went?
Yeah. And that was normal back then. Today, a movie gets released all over the world at the same time because of piracy, right? That wasn't a thing back then. You could wait to release it, and sometimes they would say, okay, we want to find out if this movie's going to be a hit because we'll hold it back because maybe we'll be able to make better deals with the theaters, or they had already had theaters booked for other movies. So it was a whole different business model back then. So we had the royal premiere in December of 1985, and Princess Diana came to it, and Charles as well. They were there. They made it royal. It was a benefit for the Prince's Trust, I believe, and they had a wonderful time. So I do remember that very vividly because they gave us all these rules. Okay, you can't talk to the royals unless they talk to you first, and this is how it has to be, and the wives can't be in the receiving line. So, my wife is, kind of standing off to the side, watching me meet Prince Charles and Princess Diana. By the time we did Back to the Future Part 3, they did allow wives in the receiving line.
I wonder if you watch films now and you clearly see the influence of your film on the films you were watching. Like, do you ever think, oh, that is so Back to the Future?
Oh, absolutely. And then there are literal references. I mean, if you watch Avengers Endgame, they talk about what they're going to do in it. And, I think it's Ant-Man who has that line saying, what? You mean Back to the Future is BS? Yeah, it is.
And what do you make now of the global reaction when people see your musical on the stage?
Oh, it's fabulous. It's just absolutely wonderful. And interestingly enough, we see there are people that that come see the musical that hadn't even seen the movie before, which was surprising me. You mean what? You mean there's really a few people that haven't seen the movie? But the musical works whether you are familiar with the movie or not. We kind of thought, okay, there will be people that only saw the movie one time way back in the day, and we need to make sure that there's nothing here that's going to leave them lost, which is kind of the way I felt when I saw the Harry Potter play, because there's so many inside references to the Harry Potter series that I didn't remember or whatever, but we didn't want that to happen. So we just opened the show in Japan, and they are insane for it over there. It's sold out for the rest of the year. It's great. And then we're going to open it in Australia. Then our 5th year at the Adelphi Theatre in London begins in August. Brian Connolly's going to play Doc Brown for 3 months, so that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to coming over and seeing how he handles the character. We're going to open it in Hamburg, Germany in the spring.
Wow.
Yeah, Back to the Future isn't going away.
No. And which part of the life story of Back to the Future are you most proud of, would you say?
I'd say one of the things that I'm most proud of is that when the movie came out, people understood that there was a script here, that this movie that was so intricate, that had so much detail, that had so much setups and payoffs, and it was so, intertwined, there had to have been a screenplay. Because a lot of times people go to the movies and they think, oh, the actor made up their own lines. Or they're just not thinking about the script aspect of it. And Back to the Future made people very aware that somebody had to figure this out. And that's a very, I'm proud of that they recognize that Bob Zemeckis and I had to have figured this out way ahead of time. Because a lot of times you watch a movie and you're saying, did anybody read the script? Was there a script here?
Yeah, and what a script. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been a privilege to speak to you.
Thank you so much, Josephine. Pleasure being here. For those of you that haven't seen Back to the Future, the musical, and want to kind of relive Back to the Future in a new way, because we're never going to give you Back to the Future Part 4. We're real happy with the 3 movies the way they are, but this is why we did the theatrical musical, so that you can re-experience the spirit and the energy of Back to the Future in a new format. And even if you think you don't want to do it, believe me, you're going to want to do it.
That's it for today's Witness History podcast, but we have thousands more stories, so why not go to wherever you get your BBC podcasts and check them out. And if the making of amazing movies is your kind of thing, why not check out Making Jaws, another Steven Spielberg classic. Thank you, bye-bye.